In this video, we'll take a look at creating and modeling walls. On the Ribbon tab, you can see that the Wall tool is here on the Architecture tab and the Build panel. And this is your Wall tool. There's a drop-down menu that shows you can pick from an architectural wall, a structural wall, or a wall by face, which we'll cover later in the massing lecture. Since we'll be mainly dealing with architectural walls, you do not have to use the drop-down menu. As you can see, architectural wall is the first item on the drop-down menu. And therefore, you don't need to select the drop-down menu. If you want the first option under the drop-down menu, all you have to do is select the tool. There we selected the Wall tool and we can model a wall. If we highlight this wall, we can see the different properties over in the Properties palette. But we can also take a look at the different types of walls Revit has. Once you select the wall, you can see that this one is a basic, generic 8-inch thick wall. But if we go to the drop-down menu, we can see all the wall types that Revit has. And you can look at the prefix. It is categorized as exterior walls. There's a foundation wall. There are generic walls. And there are interior walls. Followed by a retaining wall and a soffit. And then there are two more categories. The curtain wall and the stacked wall. We'll learn about curtain walls at a lecture later in the semester. Going back to selecting this wall, you can see several things happen. The wall turns blue. You have grips, these little blue dots, at either end of the wall. You have a couple arrows, that's called the flip section. And then you have a blue dimension string with a dimension. One thing to keep in mind in Revit is that anything blue on the screen is something that you can edit. The wall is highlighted, so it is blue. That means you can grab the grips and make it longer or shorter. Well, the dimension is also in blue. That means we can highlight the dimension. This will not only change the dimension, but more importantly, it will decide the length of the wall. If we highlight that dimension and we type in 50, the wall is now 50 feet long. The next item we'll look at is the flip arrow, these two arrows here. This does two things for us. One, it tells us which side of this wall is an exterior side. In this case, it doesn't make much of a difference because it's a generic 8-inch wall. There are no materials on either side. However, you can imagine if we had a brick wall with chipboard on the other side, we would want to know in floor plan view which side had the brick on it and which side had the chipboard on it. Well, the arrows tell us that that is the exterior side and therefore would be the brick. If we click those arrows, the wall flips and now the brick is on the inside. And you can see as I go back and forth that it is flipping around the center line. Let's take a look at why. If you take a look at the property palette of this wall, again, the wall is highlighted, so all of this information is talking about this wall. If we take a look at the properties, the very first property or parameter we see is the location line, the wall center line. What that means is when we flip the wall, it is going to be mirrored or flipped around the center line. We can change this to a core center line or finished face. If we change it to a finished face exterior, you can see what happens. You can see how that wall has flipped along one edge, the exterior face. And it even gives you a little indication by showing you that the grip is now on that face instead of in the center of the wall. Highlighting the wall, again, gives us this information. This properties palette is the instance parameters of this wall. An instance parameter tells us of all the parameters of this wall that are unique to this specific wall, not the wall type. If I were to highlight this wall and copy it, now I have two walls of the same type. If I highlight this, you can see it's a generic 8-inch wall. If I highlight this, it is also a generic 8-inch wall. However, this is one instance of that wall, and this is another instance of that wall. These two walls have many parameters that are in common that define them as the type. However, it's the parameters that make them different, which are the instance parameters. If we highlight this, we can take a look. This base constraint is level 1. The base offset, 0, which means the bottom of this wall goes to level 1 without being above level 1 at all, is also an instance parameter. It's 20 feet high, it's room bounding, and the phase it was created is also an instance parameter. I can go to the next wall and I can change some of these. I can say that I want the bottom of it to be 4 feet above level 1. And I can say that I want this thing to be 50 feet tall, not 20. I can create a new phase and when it was demolished. It disappeared on us because the bottom of the wall went above our cut line. But we can take a look in 3D and see that it is still there. So again, the type parameters of these two walls are the same. They are both a generic 8-inch wall. However, the instance parameters, how long it is, how tall it is, where it's located, what phase it was created in, are all instance parameters. How might you change the type of a wall? If I wanted to change both of these walls, or all the walls that were the basic wall generic 8-inch, I would highlight one of them and I would edit the type. And this brings up another dialog box called Type Properties. Changing the parameters in this Type Properties palette will change the parameters or the properties of all of the walls of the same type. For instance, if I went to its structure and I said instead of 8 inches, I wanted to make it 8 feet thick, and I hit OK, it would make two very thick walls. And you can see that it changed both of them. Let's take a look at how we might model these walls or draw these walls. I'm going to back up to make these walls back to 8 inches. I'm going to highlight them and delete them and go to my floor plan level 1. ZE is Zoom Extents, and now we have a blank screen area to start drawing some walls. If I go to my wall tool, I can see there are several parameters up in the status bar. The height is 20 feet. The location line is the wall center line. I can draw an offset or I can make a chain. At the very end of our ribbon shows us the tools that we can use to create the walls. The first one is a line. Click, click, and I have a wall. I can make a rectangle shape out of walls, and I can go through all of these tools. One is a polygon. I can figure how many sides I want. If I click and drag, it shows me how big it will be. I can make a circle. Again, if I highlight the circle, the radius, is in blue. That means I can highlight it and say I actually want it 25 feet. Wall tool, WA, gets me back to this wall command. I can create walls in an arc in different manners. From the center, and then another arc is the fillet arc. You use this when you have two walls that intersect and you want to round the edge. You click one and then the other and it makes a curve. And lastly, is the pick line. So if you have a line and you want a wall on it, say it's right on the property line, or you have drawn some sketch lines and you want to use those for your layout, you can pick the line and it will create a wall to that. The last tool in regards to creating walls that we'll look at in this video is Edit Wall Profile. To take a look at that, I'm going to get out of my wall command and delete everything we've done so far and create a new wall. WA, new wall. I'm going to look at this in 3 dimensions so you can follow along. Edit Wall Profile allows you to modify the boundary of this wall. So if you have a curved top or a slanted top, or if you want to put a hole in the wall, Edit Wall Profile is one tool that you can use to create that. If you highlight the wall, up on the ribbon you can see you get a Edit Profile mode. If you select that, you can see that the wall itself turns into a magenta boundary and everything else has grayed out. It's hard to see that on our screen today because I don't have many other objects, but you can see that other things, the steering wheel has become a little more gray. That means you can only work on the magenta outline of the wall. Let's go ahead and delete the top line, and we'll draw some curved lines. And so what this is doing is creating a new shape for the top of our wall. If we finish, what we are in is called sketch mode. That is when everything turns gray and you have a magenta outline. That is sketch mode. When we are done with our sketching, we finish sketch mode or edit mode, and you can see what we have created. If I highlight this and go back to Edit Profile, I return to sketch mode and I can continue on editing. One of the rules of sketch mode, for most of the time, is that you need a closed boundary. If I had something like this, where it's not a closed loop, and I try to finish sketch mode, it gives me an error. You cannot have intersecting lines. They must form a closed loop. Now you can have closed loops within closed loops to make a whole. These things are called islands. And that is how you can produce a hole in your wall.